Hello, everyone. Hope you had a good lunch and that now you are full for a new session exploring Quarkus on JDK 17 with me. So please keep your fingers crossed for me, for the demo guides to be with me, also screen sharing and everything to be okay. I'll try to keep an eye also on the chat if there are any questions. So if you see me like, switching my neck, that's because I'm trying to see if there is anybody asking things on the chat. I encourage you to ask questions on the chat regarding what's shared in this session, but whatever is relating to Java and everything that is in the ecosystem of Java, Quarkus, and many more. Because, well, me, that I love to answer your questions and the scenarios that you're having in your mind, and you would think that I could give you an advice. Without further ado, let me add my screen, and seems to be all good. And let's look just one more time to the chat. You also have a poll available so that you can vote a few things. I asked you a few questions there about the Java version you're using currently in production, if you like compiling to native, and of course, what Java version are you planning to migrate to? About myself, I'm Anna. I'm currently working as a developer advocate for Red Hat. In addition to this, I'm a Java champion and certified architect. And for a long, long time, I've been passionate about scenarios that are having a higher complexity around using Java and Java frameworks. So my experience throughout the years has been with multiple frameworks. And of course, multiple cloud providers, and trying different options in terms of getting closer to cloud app or cloud native app. I enjoy working with Kubernetes as well, and also with OpenShift. Without further delay, what we'll be discussing today is about why to use Java, what are the Quarkus differentiators, and of course, some demos and some Q&As at the end. Of course, if there's any issue, I'll try to adjust my voice and everything down the road while I'm keeping an eye on the chat. So first of all, let's discuss why use Java 17. I mean, what are the reasons that should make you think to migrate to Java 17? Well, if you're still on 8, because at the beginning of the session, at the beginning of the conference today, I asked on the chat, what version are you using? And there were some responses in the poll that were regarding 8. However, you should note that there are some JVM changes since Java 8, like more consistent runtimes. You have multiple garbage collectors to choose from. I mean, starting with Java 9, it was G1 introduced in from a lot more followed. Why is good to have multiple garbage collectors? Well, to choose from is great because you can compare how your application is consuming, but not necessarily consuming, how your application is performing under different of them, and how your runtime is going on, and how its performance is being influenced by each of them. By the way, if you're using Micrometer, probably it doesn't matter if you use it with a Spring Boot or with Quarkus. Most of the time, you get some default metrics that you can export regarding the garbage collector, and you can see how your objects are being collected, how that is. How those are being evacuated, how much time for those it took, and so on. And if you're thinking, where is the impact of this? The short answer is cost. Then, also starting with Java, with the recent versions of Java, there was default container awareness. So before, I think, at the patch 131 of Java 8, there was a small glitch, meaning that when you were giving some memory restrictions to a container via the probably the Docker restrictions for memory, those weren't necessarily passed to your runtime. That one was seeking for the system's default memory available there, which is not always the one that you are setting up at the container level. However, now it's becoming as a default. So one more new thing to think about when it comes to working with the newer version of Java. And of course, you can observe apps that you're running Java apps at the low performance cost, especially when it comes to profiling, and of course to looking into production and looking with Java Mission Control over there. You can monitor and profile with Java Flight Recorder and ingest and visualize with Java Mission Control. So furthermore, what happens with the us, when we're working with it, because we're also interested in the language features. Well, what is also nice to know about Java 17 is that it introduced safely for us to use things like records to store some data. If you want a comparison, you can think of them like at value from Lombok, if you use Lombok. Also introduce sealed classes so that it can ease for us the ability to propagate certain inheritance across classes. And that can be very helpful, especially when designing APIs, so that you're exposing just enough data to your users safely, and you don't it doesn't happen that a colleague overlaps with you and is inheriting by mistake something you didn't meant to be inherited by a certain class. And then to have things to propagated or changed with more difficulty. And then last but not least, there's some sweetness coming with the extended switch expressions. This is just one case of the extended switch expression here, but you can have even more ways of working with these. And in today's demo, we're going to look into these things a little bit more complex than just here in the slide. However, as working with a new Java version is great, but it's also good to have a framework that helps you work with this one as well, so that you don't code everything from scratch. So what are the differentiators that make Quarkus great, especially with Java 17? Well, it is, as probably some of you know, is that with Quarkus, you have a fast boot time and a low memory footprint. It's also serverless fit, as you saw in the demo that Adam Bean has done this morning in the keynote. And of course, it kind of makes you happy when you're coding with it because you get live coding, you get continuous testing and dev services. I'm going to use today continuous testing. I don't have a database backing or any other service backing up my demo today to show you dev services as well. But you can think of dev services like a zero config setup for, let's say, databases, for quite a lot of them. For Kafka, for example, or even for some security services. Furthermore, it unifies the imperative and reactive way of coding. So it would be great to both combine reactive and imperative when working, and also this can get you to working with event-driven apps. And of course, a lot of integrations with a lot of libraries, and of course, it follows the most important standard of them all, the Java standard. Now, speaking of container first, why that should be something of interest for you? Well, container first is something that should be really important for you as Java developers. And for me as a Java developer, it is important because I want for my application to start fast. And this fast startup time is impacting a lot your application when this application needs to scale. Because you can say, it took a little longer to start, it's fine, it's just one time. If it's just one time, it's great. But most of the time, the load that an application is experiencing is varying during a day, for example. And maybe during certain intervals in a day, your application is experiencing more load. And in that case, it will need to scale. If you're working with Kubernetes, that will mean to instantiate a new pod. And that pod, it will again need to use the same startup time for your application when it needs to, scale what's going on there. So always think of that fast start time is helping you when scaling to dynamically scale better, but also is helping you also when you downscale. Of course, another part that you should be aware of is to have a smaller disk footprint. And this is important, let's say, for example, that's something that is happening with one of your Kubernetes nodes. And most of the providers that are offering a Kubernetes service nowadays, OpenShift included, they can spin up for you a new node, which is actually a clone of, is going to try to clone what was available in the one that's not healthy anymore. Of course, it's not going to clone also the unhealthy state. And what's going on is that when that new node that's going to be spun up, all the container images will be downloaded again from your container image registry. If you have container images that are like fat, that will take longer time to be done. So that's one thing that you should be thinking about is like in case of self-healing, you need to also help Kubernetes to self-heal as well. Then another factor, we should be happy when we're coding, and Quarkus is doing this for us because, well, continuous testing is enabling consistent testing. You'll see that in a moment. And it's important to be fast when you're coding, because you get to a quicker iteration over features and fixes. So less time spent on local setups, it's meaning time with code delivered faster to the upper environments. And of course, by going reactive, you can get even closer to event-driven apps. One thing that I'd like to mention to you regarding reactive, Quarkus is using a library called Mutiny. So Mutiny is having very nice methods that can help you write beautiful code without you using any other intermediaries to write those beautiful methods and to actually express what you mean within your reactive code. Moreover, we have frameworks, we have standards, and of course, these are just a few of the integrations that are available with Quarkus. Many more are available in the code at quarkus.io, and of course, there are guides regarding each of them. Now let's go into the demo part, because I think it's better to see than just to talk about things. So we can use your compiler of choice, as mentioned earlier, with Quarkus. So it's good. You can use GraalVM, or you can use OpenJDK if you want. Then you can start to code at Quarkus.io. That's where I'm going to start as well. And you can add the extensions that you need either from code.quarkus.io, or you can add them via the Quarkus CLI. This is how you can add the Kubernetes extension that generates automatically for you the Kubernetes resources that could help you to deploy your application to Kubernetes. So you don't need, as a Java developer, to code any YAML. It will generate it for you. Let's go to the part that's more fun. So today, we want to build an application that will consume an API. This is the board API that we will consume today. And we're going to consume several endpoints of this API to help build us our application. It's going to use Java 17 and Quarkus and look to some features of Java 17 I previously mentioned. And of course, to build our application, first of all, we need to make a skeleton of it. And by that, I mean go to code.quarkus.io, because this is probably the easiest way and the nicest way. Go to a browser and generate a file. You can also generate it to your GitHub if you want. And let's generate it. com.redhat.developers. Here, sample app. I'm used to working with Maven, so I'll use Maven for now. If you don't want to use Java 17, you can also go with the default Java 11. But nowadays, Java 17 is available by default. You can also have the option of starter code, like boilerplate some code for you, so together with tests, so that you have some examples. Or you can say, hey, I don't want any starter code, and that's it. It's going to be just a skeleton of the project. It's up to you. As we're consuming a service, first of all, we need a client. So let me just get here and pull it like this. Oh, yes, Quarkus REST client. As we need to make our own API, let's go with just the default ones, the Quarkus REST Easy and the Quarkus REST Easy JSONB, because we're going to focus more on the features of Java 17, not necessarily on showing too much of the Quarkus. And then I want to see my API while I'm developing it, because I like Swagger and seeing that, so I'm going to add the Open API extension as well. What else? Well, I would need to containerize this, right? So just for the interest of it, I don't have any other daemon running on my machine right now, so I'm going to use the container image zip to containerize my app. And also, because I'm consuming this external service, I'm kind of worried that it might not work as expected, so I'm going to add the small rifle tolerance to it. That's it that I need for my app to generate it. And I can download it as a zip, or I can also, go and just have it done and sent to my GitHub, so push to my GitHub. In this case, I'm not gonna go further. You can have it and download it as a zip as well. No worries. At the end of the session, I'm going to share all the code and also an article on how to generate an app with other ways. There are multiple ways to generate an app with Quarkus nowadays. So let's look about the app that I've done. So I have a hobby resource that's exposing my API. And this hobby resource at the moment is using a class hierarchy to showcase some of the activities that are available in the board API. What I want to tell you is that I'm not consuming anything yet in my board from the board API because I didn't make the integration. I didn't want to do that. I just want to focus on modernizing this small skeleton and then look into the other ones. Just to give you an overview, this is the hierarchy that I have right now. So there's a basic hobby that's going to get the basic information about my activity. There's a priced hobby that contains also the price of a basic activity. And the complete hobby is containing some more details that are in the activity part, and is also adding some of the things from my API as well. Before going further, I just need to get a response that's more complete. And let's get it here, because I need to code a few stuff. So the way that we used to code this kind of inheritance before Java 17, we used to start with the basic hobby, and looking into it. Let's make it a little bigger. We would have done it here, and then we would have said hey, priced hobby extends basic hobby, and so on and so forth. But this kind of exposes us to the possibility for my basic hobby to be inherited by other classes as well. So when I want to introduce a change in basic hobby to impact behavior of the others as well. So if I really want to adhere to this kind of a picture with Java 17, what I can do this. I can say public sealed class basic hobby and say permits, because I'm looking to this picture. And hey, this one permits only to priced hobby. I can also say to complete hobby, but it's better to propagate the inheritance properly, and permits is allowing this to do it. So I'd say permits priced hobby. Okay, so this is the first part that's going on here. Of course, now there'll be some problems, because the priced hobby now, that is a direct superclass from the basic hobby, it needs also some modifiers to it. So if I'm not going to inherit anymore, I can use final. But since I need to propagate a few more things for the complete hobby, I can make this as a sealed class as well. But I also have to permit the complete hobby the inheritance. So complete hobby, so that everything is going as expected. And last but not least, let's go to the complete hobby. And this one also needs some keyword in front of it. If I don't want for the hobby to be inherited anymore and extended anymore by anybody else, I can go with final. But since I'm not sure about my API, I can also say non-sealed. And that is going to still keep complete hobby available for extension further, But with the other ones, with the priced hobby, it permits only inheritance to complete hobby, and basic hobby permits the inheritance only to the priced one. So this is the beauty of restricting access to your classes and to what's going on in your classes via the sealed and non-sealed modifiers, and of course via permits. Now that we've done this, let's look at the hobby resource. So the hobby resource has 3 endpoints that at the moment they're kind of dummy. They don't do much. And I want for them to actually use the API that I was telling you about earlier and consume the information from there and not be that dummy. So first of all, let's start the app, nvn Quarkus dev. This is going to start my Quarkus application in dev mode. So that's going to be happening really fast. And now it says tests paused. What I actually did, I created some tests for my app so I can do a little test-driven development, if I can say so, for my endpoints and verify myself down the road with the continuous testing enabled that I'm actually coding the right thing. Okay, so first of all, let's consume the board API and make a class here and say activity service.java. To consume the board API, I can make an interface called activity service. And I need some of the endpoints. This is one. I need the type, for example. And I can also have the accessibility. Yep. Cool. Let's go here and make this a REST client. So register REST client, put a path to it. Of course, I think it would be nice to put only this path to it. And then put this, annotate this as a singleton, so that it's not, making a new instance of activity service every time that I am using it from my hobby resource. Now let's go further here and code a few methods. So first of all, the random one at get, and this is the first one. Just looking back to the activity service, it should return a priced hobby. Okay, so priced hobby get random activity, and that's it. The next one should be one with type. The type is, of course, getting a parameter. Okay, so I think this one, it should return a basic hobby. We'll see. Get basic hobby, get get activity by type, and of course at query param. And here the name is type, string type. Okay. And the last but not least is going to have again some query parameters. But since it's needing some accessibility, this one is going to be a complete hobby, which has accessibility in it. Get activity with accessibility. And of course, replace a few things in the query parameters here. At query param. Put here the max. And put, sorry, the string max accessibility. Okay, let me look here. Do I have any problems? Yes, path cannot be resolved as a type. Forgot to import something. And now I just need to reference my service in the configuration. So Quarkus.rest-client. Here the key and the URL is here. And here I just need to put the path to my service, including the package com.redhat.developers.activity service. Now that I've done this, looking back to my terminal, okay, it says it cannot find the symbol path, but I've just imported it, so it should be fine later on. Okay. Now that I've done this, this is working, let me also do an injection of this one here. And I just can annotate it with that REST client and say activity service, so that it is using the service part. And now that is there. Okay. Hope you don't have any issues anymore. Let me just clean this part here. Okay. And now that it's only the test failed, so it's it has reloaded my parts. Let's use my services and the ones that I've just done. I didn't have to produce any JSON because that's not needed for the moment. Let's go to localhost 8080 and see what's going on with my services from dev UI, Swagger UI. Okay, so if I'm going to actions, right now it's not doing, it's not getting anything because I haven't replaced from my resources. Okay, so now we can use this one. Service, get random activity. This one, service, get activity with accessibility, and now it's done and is there. And now let's do the last one. Now the last one has a story, and this one has much more, much more. Let me see what's going on. I put the strings in here instead of double. That's a very good catch from the IDE. So yeah, there's actually, it's not a string, it's a double. Let's go here back to the hobby resource and make the other test pass as well. So what the story here says is that as a consumer, I expect for this method to support successfully only recreational activity, return no content for drawing type of activity, and for all the other activities to have some kind of a scenario. Now, typically what this kind of story here is not saying just the simple answer, and this is probably my test, why my tests are failing, is meaning that it needs a switch. And you can do this kind of thing, like return switch by type. And not only this, and return the switch by type, you can go with the cases. And the first case was saying case recreational. Okay, then this time, do the right thing. And in this case, I'm doing something like response status, status.okay, entity, and here service, get activity by type, because in this case, I'm on the happy scenario, right? And build. Now let's look at the second scenario that's being set here. Okay, you have an issue with this one, but probably you're gonna figure it out down the way. Then, return no content for drawing type of activity. The next case. So this kind of short-circuited case is great for working in these scenarios, and also is available with Java 17. So now next for drawing, return no content. So response dot status dot no content, and of course entity. On this one, I can say, hey, basic hobby dot empty, return something empty, and build things for me. Now, for the other cases, it says for all the other activities, this means for me a default. But default with ifs and else, it sounds a little bit tricky. What I can do, because I'm in Java 17, I can do first an assessment if the type is present in the API. So I can say basic hobby and say hobby, service, get activity by type, and assess if this is in the API. If this is in the API, this means that my hobby has more than 0 participants. So if it has more than 0 participants, the response should be not implemented. So not implemented. And on this one, let me think about, I can build directly. It's not gonna care if it's implemented or not. Else, for the other case, the response status should be service unavailable. And of course, on this one, I can say, I don't know, maybe something more complex, or I can even say, let's give it an entity. Maybe I'm going to support it in the future with the API. Empty and build, of course. And of course, probably some of you are saying, hey, where's the return? You don't need a return if you're using this magic thing called yield. So what yield is doing is short-circuiting for you what's going on there, and it's going to return the result to you. And of course, we have just one more test failing. And let's look at which test is failing. Here, the expectation code was 200, but the status was 503, which is get complete hobby. Let's look in the test. What haven't we done? Get complete hobby. Oh, yes, I forgot to annotate something. Path here is accessibility, not accessible. So this means I should go here and modify accordingly. Or I can just put the accessible path over there and it'd be the same. So now my all 6 tests are passing. Now that I've done this, What I can do next to improve my API, because right now I'm kind of depending on an external API that can do this, you know, and then again, all my tests are failing because I'm invoking an endpoint that doesn't exist. So what I can do to guard myself against these kind of situations, let's take, for example, this one. I can add a few things like a circuit breaker annotation and circuit breaker, and let me import it. And for this one, I can add a few things to make it a little bit more resilient so that it's not behaving that bad when I'm, you know, invoking failure endpoints. So I can say failure ratio, okay, 0.75. So when 75% of the requests are failing, please stop invoking that thing. But still, like, please try to look into this after 5 seconds, like try to keep it in half open, the circuit. Maybe do some retries and say max retries, I don't know, 4. And the rest of the things, I wouldn't try them necessarily, but for the moment, just to keep it short. And then try this at a delay of 100 milliseconds. And last but not least, let me import it so that it doesn't cry for it. I can do fallback. Now, for the fallback, you see the fallback method apply on and so on. I can do the fallback method because even though that we are in interface, we can also make default methods here, but we can also work with classes. So I can do my default priced hobby.class. So what this means is that I can make my own class here. Now, in the past, maybe working with 11 instead of 17, because we're talking about long-term supported releases, I would have created here a static class, an inner static class. But what I can do now is do this, record default priced hobby. If this is with an empty constructor, I don't need any parameters to construct this one, and say implement fallback handler from the fault tolerance. And of course here with the priced hobby as a parameter. So let's add the non-implemented methods. What it can do with this kind of record, you can also implement the equals the hash code and toString for it. So that's the benefit of records, besides storing some data. But also, you can return this data much more easier and say priced hobby.empty in case something is failing. So now that, you know, I've done this for the priced hobby, there are 2 tests that are passing, the other 4 are failing. So I've introduced one less thing to be worried about using records in a new Java 17. So this is how you can easily use these things. Of course, you can define the records separately as well. You can have the records with constructors with more, you know, more fields and do even more with them. But for this kind of exercise, for quickly prototyping my default, it was quite at hand and quite easy for me to do. Next thing that I would like to do with my app, now that I'm working with it, and let's just make it work again with the board API. And just let's try the endpoint that everything is working as expected. So this one is working fine. Let's try it out with my endpoint, recreational, okay, execute, good. If I'm eating one letter here, it should say 503 undocument, so it's doing the right thing. Next thing I should do with my app, I should like containerize it, like to make it a real modern Java app, right? So what I can do with it, I need to like specify a few things. First of all, I can say to Quarkus, which I'm going to use with the part with the building and the pushing, I can say, hey, build my container image because it's using JIP. So I can say this and instruct Quarkus to do this at the package time. Push my container image. Of course, you need to know where to do these. So I'm going to use my registry, which is quay.io, and of course, my user which is Anna Sandbox. And next, I need a tag. So container image tag. And I can say this one because it's going to be JVM based. It's going to be JVM VD 1.0. So I'm just going to put this tag here. If you're using native, well, with native you can change the the base image with jib and have something like specifying your own base image, something like this. And this is just the base native image when you want to work with the JVM, or in this case, well, you'll get to even smaller container images, by the way. Or if you still want to change the container image and want to use the JVM one, you can use the jib-based JVM image as change. But for the moment, we're not going to need this one. We're going to just go with the defaults because we trust the jib extension. Let me think about, I think we're kind of okay. Let's package our application and say clear, MVN, clean package. What this is going to do, thanks to these two, it's going to build and push my container image to the place that I instructed it to do, and with the tag that I put it here. So the tests are passing. Everything is going okay. You can see the jib is doing its magic behind the scenes, so no Docker daemon, nothing started. Okay, seems that probably, this is not my user. It happens. I was trying to push to a group that it doesn't belong to me. It happens when I'm in a hurry. So let's build it and test it. And of course, we're going to, at the end, deploy this to Kubernetes as well. Now that everything is working as expected, maybe I don't want it for you to see that it put it and generated everything. Let's go here to my Quay.io. Okay, I have my image. Notice that because it's JVM based, it has like 100 and something megabytes, quite big. If you're looking to the other ones, which are native, they're like 54. And native micro is 30, even smaller. But we want to use it and deploy it. So I'm going to use the Red Hat developer OpenShift sandbox and add it from the container image, say here Quarkus, and of course deploy it. Just put the defaults and it's going to work. If you're interested in also into deploying the sample of today or deploying any of your samples, you can go to developers.redhat.com and provision your own sandbox for free for 30 days. You don't need to input any credit card. You can renew it after 30 days. And you just have to click on Launch Your Developer Sandbox for Red Hat OpenShift. It will demand for you to have a Red Hat account. But again, it doesn't demand you any more details so that you can test Kubernetes and OpenShift as a developer safely. Deployment happens so quickly. Yeah, Kubernetes can work so quickly. OpenShift is making this kind of things. So now I've done this. Of course, the developer console is not available. If I'm going to the action side, I can see that my app was deployed and working as expected. So the code, you find it here. It was firstly developed for an article that I published on developers.redhat.com. However, if you go to the repo, you find all the examples that I showed you today, so you can try it natively as well, and try it with different base images in the native side, because Quarkus can get you to even smaller container images. Of course, please pay attention to the startup time, because nothing is for free, especially when you're trying to achieve some goals with the native images. So always try to do a benchmark when you're doing those things as well. Furthermore, I'm going to share the slides with you, no worries. You can also connect to the Quarkus team on quarkusio.zulipchat.com if you have any complaints or if you have any questions. They're like all the time listening for suggestions, because Quarkus is improved based on user feedback. And of course, you can look into some other resources that are available in the Java world. For us, for the cloud, for the developers that are looking to going cloud native, is modernizing enterprise Java that was written by my colleagues Marcus Aicele and Intellij Vinto. It contains a lot of Quarkus examples, native and not only, and it's a great starter to the native way of developing with Java. That was it from my side. Let me look into the chat if there are any questions. So there are questions. Can we have the sample project? Yes, you can have the sample project. It is available, as mentioned here, if you scan the code, the QR code. Also, is there a reason for using Visual Studio Code, or is it just a personal preference? It is a personal preference. That's the thing. And another question is, does Quarkus has a similar thing to Spring Initializer in Intellij or only on Quarkus.io? Quarkus has a similar thing to Spring Initializer in Intellij. It's because there's a Quarkus plugin available in Intellij, like the Quarkus plugin I'm having in Visual Studio Code, that you can use to initialize your Quarkus projects. So don't worry about that. You are having full support on that one as well. As I said, there are multiple ways of instantiating Quarkus. You can do it from Maven plugin. You can do it from archetypes. You can do it from the CLI. You can do it from the IDEs. So just feel free to work from the place that you feel more comfortable with the code. Very great questions. Thank you very much.